It is currently late spring, early summer here in Missouri Zone 6B, and I'm going to show you what I'm growing and harvesting right now in my container vegetable garden. So, this time of year, when we're in between the spring and summer growing seasons, so you have your cool season vegetables that are wrapping up and you're getting your warm season vegetables planted, I have some challenges because since I use all the space in each of my containers, I'm still having to wait until some of my vegetable plants are done being harvested before I can plant all of my summer vegetables in. And so, what you're going to see today is kind of how I manage this in between season time. Starting with my herb containers and trellis. So, this trellis is actually new this year. I've been trying to find ways to add in more vertical gardening just since I am limited on my space. So, I have my herbs in this container, and partly that is because my kitchen door is right next to it. And so, I really like being able to come outside of the kitchen when I'm making a meal and just snip off some herbs. So that proximity, having my herbs closer to my kitchen, just makes it a little easier. And then this trellis is a good example of where you can see how I'm kind of in between seasons. So on one side, I'm currently finishing up my sugar snap peas. They were growing on both sides, but on the one side where I've harvested them, they were mostly done growing. I didn't see many more blooms. And so I went ahead and harvested those several days ago. But on the other side, there were still some blooms, still some peas that were filling out. And so I decided to leave those in just a little bit longer to be able to get a bigger harvest from those. And then on the side where I had harvested them, I actually just recently, here in the last few days, planted some cucumber seeds. And so I'll be growing cucumbers on one side. I'm actually planning to harvest the other snap peas here in the next couple of days. They're mostly done. And on that side of the trellis, I'm going to put some pole beans. So on this trellis, I'll be growing both cucumbers and pole beans. These snap peas are really neat. So I'm growing two different varieties on this trellis. I'm growing a purple snap pea and a green snap pea. And there was clearly some cross pollination that happened here and it created these that have a little bit of both. In this container, I've already harvested most of my spring vegetables. I just recently finished harvesting my snap peas off of this trellis. So that section in the middle that's currently empty, that's because those were just harvested. The ones on the sides were done early. So I pulled them and went ahead and planted my pole beans. And then I just got more of those pole bean seeds in the middle section here in the last few days. They have not germinated yet, but as you can see, those pole beans are growing really well so far. And then in the front, I have a few different summer squash plants. I have already started to see the vine borer eggs on my squash plant. So those are something I'm checking every single day to get those eggs off. In this container, I also have basil growing. I have green onions, and then I have two cherry tomato plants. This container doesn't get a lot of sunlight throughout the day, maybe around 5 hours. And so I did the cherry tomato plants because those tend to need less sunlight than the tomato varieties that are going to be those bigger tomatoes. I also have some Swiss chard in this container. Swiss chard is one leafy green that I find I'm able to grow throughout the entire year. So most of my leafy greens I'm just growing in those spring cooler season months because they will bolt once it gets a little warmer. But my Swiss chard is something I have found can grow in the summer as well. And so you'll see I have a lot of that in my garden. I did realize a couple days ago that I had some aphids on these tomato plants, so I have been spraying those down with water to get those aphids off, and then I also sprayed some Castile soap on these last night to try to get those aphids under control. These two back containers are shaded for the majority of the day, and so this is where I'm still growing my greens that really need some cooler temperatures and are going to struggle if they're out in the sun too much. So I currently have several varieties of kale. I have a lot of that Swiss chard again. At this point in the year, I am still having to check for those cabbage moth eggs. So they are still laying those on my brassicas, and I'm having to go through and check, which isn't a big deal. I have some railing planters in my garden. These do also get a lot of shade. And so what I'm growing in these are herbs. I have a lot of parsley, and then I'm also growing thyme, oregano, and mint. This container is another kind of mixture of my spring and summer vegetables. So I do have my carrots still growing. Carrots always take a long time to grow. This year I did have some leafy greens on the majority of this container during the spring growing season. And what I realized was those were actually shading out my carrot seedlings. So these carrots didn't get a lot of sunlight throughout the season. I'm leaving them in a little bit longer just to see if I can get them to mature more. They are pretty small at this point. I'm probably going to leave them in for 1 or 2 more weeks. I am getting impatient because I love to be able to harvest those so I have more space to put some of those summer vegetables in. But again, that's just kind of the compromise you have to make this time of year, especially if you're a small space container gardener. But I'm hoping that once I do harvest them, they'll be a little bigger and it will have been worth the wait. Also, in this container, I have more of that Swiss chard that I planted in the spring. I have 3 different summer squash varieties. Again, I have found vine borer eggs on the stems of these, so I'm checking those every day. I have a green onion growing, Thai basil, regular basil, and then I also have an eggplant and a tomato plant growing as well. Both the eggplant and the tomato plant are smaller varieties. So the eggplant is a patio variety, the tomato is a cherry tomato, and that is because this one also gets quite a bit of shade throughout the day. And so I'm planting those smaller varieties. This tomato plant has started to flower, so that is really exciting. I do normally pinch my suckers off. I'm trying something a little different this year. I'm letting some of them grow. I've just seen so many mixed opinions on this. There's a lot of different thoughts that gardeners have on whether you should pinch those or not. Like I said, I normally do. Trying something a little different this year, so we'll see how it goes and if it's something I want to continue. Down here, I have metal containers on a table. This is where I have some of my greens still. I have kale and Swiss chard. I also have some herbs, some dill and parsley and thyme. And this area also gets a lot of shade during the day, so leaving those leafy greens here is probably going to be best for this space. And then down here, I have some raised beds, another shaded area. Like I said at the beginning, I really have some challenges with sunlight. But down here, I have another cherry tomato plant. I have Thai basil. I have a patio eggplant. And then I do have a pepper plant. We'll see how that one does. I also have parsley, savory, sorrel. And then I also still have a couple of my celery plants that I started in the spring. This is my front raised bed, and this gets a lot more sunlight than the backyard. So up here is where I put the majority of my plants that need a lot of sunlight. So right now I'm kind of, again, in between the seasons. I have those red cabbages that I'm still wrapping up. They should be ready maybe in the next week or two, trying to be patient with those. And then I've also planted a lot of my tomatoes and peppers up here. I'm planning to add more tomato and pepper plants here in this top section, and then of course, once I harvest the cabbages as well, there will be more warm season plants that I'll put in there. On the back trellis, I do still have my snap peas growing. I did plant some pole bean seedlings down in the bottom there. They haven't sprouted, but any space where I have a little bit of room to start adding in the next season vegetable plants, I will start doing that. So I added those pole beans there. Hopefully, will germinate here in the next few days. I still have a few blooms left on these snap peas, and so I will probably wait maybe till the end of this week to go ahead and harvest these, but I'll be growing cucumbers and pole beans on this trellis once those are totally done. Thanks for letting me show you around my garden, and I hope you'll come back for my next garden tour in midsummer.